What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the fourth and final day of the 2019 Film Room Fantasy Ranking Specials for PPR format. Today we're hitting tight ends, the last position group that we're going over in detail. I'm going to be talking about all the different round values that I see for these guys, specifically when it comes to depth, because I don't necessarily believe in putting them in strict tiers, because I think when you put them by tier, people kind of lose track of where their depth pockets are, I guess is a good way to put it, in terms of like round 3 having really good depth, round 5 having really good depth, but I'm not really going to take one in rounds 1 and 2, where if you put them strictly in tiers, it might be easy to lose track of that. So I like to organize it by round, as you can see, so that you can kind of get a better idea of where the different strengths and weaknesses in this group are in terms of draft value. So, and I will say, just kind of speaking on depth real quick here, in terms of the overall depth of the class, this is probably the most amount of tight end talent that's going to have a fantasy impact that I can remember in a while. Most years there's like a core group of like 3 or 4, maybe 5 that everybody is going after, and then it kind of falls off a cliff, and it kind of doesn't really matter after that. You're going to take one in the 12th, 13th round and not really care. Like this year, there is a lot of tight ends, not just front-loaded, like there's premier names, there's guys in the middle rounds that could all make a case for being top 3 or 4 tight ends, and then there's depth. There's a lot of depth in rounds like 8, 9, in the double-digit rounds after that. There's some sleepers that I really like if you're in a 2 tight end league, this year's going to be a lot of fun because there's a ton of tight ends that matter, I guess is a good way of putting it, that actually matter for once. So I'm very excited about getting into them. But before I do want to take a minute to thank our sponsor. They've sponsored every single episode of these fantasy rankings this week, and they've been a really great partner for the channel overall, Manscaped. They provide anything and everything that a man needs for grooming, whether it's really durable, waterproof, no-nick ceramic trimmers, to safety razors that both cut closer and are really, really easy and cheap to maintain because replacements for safety razors are super inexpensive, to body washes, colognes, anti-chafe deodorants, even boxer briefs. Like whatever you need, they've got it. And you can buy all of their products either individually a la carte or as part of a complete package called the Perfect Package 2.0 that comes out essentially to half the price. And if you do already have any of those products separately that maybe you bought from previous promotions and you love them and you want more of them, Manscaped also, of course, now offers replenish plans that send you refills at whatever time interval you choose at an even more heavily discounted rate. So if you want to try out Manscaped, or if you've already tried them out and you love their products and you want more of them, head on over to the link in the description below and enter promo code BRETT20 for both 20% off the order of your choice and, of course, free shipping. And with that, let's get back into these tight ends, of course, starting with the three-headed monster in the third round. That's Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, and George Kittle. These are by far the top 3 tight ends on everybody's board. I think everybody has them in some order in their fantasy rankings. Some people have Kelce as like a high second or even a mid-second round pick. I'm not necessarily ready to pull the trigger that early. Not that I don't think he won't be extremely productive, but just kind of on principle, I don't like to draft tight ends that early. That's just a position where like third round is usually the earliest I'm willing to go, with like the one exception being Rob Gronkowski back when he was in his prime. And even then, I only went like late second max. So Travis Kelce, extremely productive. Zach Ertz, also productive. George Kittle, also productive. But I really reserve the top 2 rounds for wide receivers and for running backs because I have to play more of them every single week. More depth is required for them. They get injured a lot, especially running backs. So I really like to load up at those positions that I need more of first before I go after a position where most of the time I'm only playing one of them in most leagues for pretty much the whole year. So Travis Kelce, he will put up numbers comparable to a lot of wide receivers, and so will Zach Ertz, and so will George Kittle. You look at their yardage and their receptions totals, but again, just on principle, I really don't attack tight end early because I only need one of them. I don't need a lot of them. As for Kelce himself, like as a talent, I have him ranked first just because I really love the offense he's in. The whole gang is getting back together. Pat Mahomes, MVP caliber quarterback. I did a whole episode explaining why I was so wrong in my evaluation of Mahomes. And kind of that was like my giving penance to Chiefs fans for doubting them last year, specifically doubting Mahomes. I mean, he is incredible and one of the best quarterback talents that I've ever seen. And his development from college to now in just 1 year on the bench, like that floored me. Absolutely floored me. Like that came out of nowhere. At least to me it did. So Pat Mahomes taught me a lot of lessons about how to evaluate quarterbacks, how to project development, and how to not be so rigid in my, preconceived notions of what a system can and can't be. And he taught me a big lesson when I was evaluating, Baker Mayfield, and when I was evaluating Kyler Murray, guys who came out of similar systems, and how Baker kind of hit the ground running, how I think Kyler's going to hit the ground running. Pat Mahomes was a big teacher for me last year, and I think he's going to be a big reason why Travis Kelce remains arguably the most productive tight end in the league. Tyreek Hill is back as well. He avoided a suspension, so he's going to be there since week 1. Kareem Hunt's no longer there, but Damian Williams, I think, is still a talented enough back to make this run game extremely effective. They say they're going to be running a committee, but I still think Williams is probably the best back in that backfield. Not as talented as Kareem Hunt, but he's a tough physical downhill runner who can really fight through contact and move the chains. So I don't really expect a huge dip in production for that run game. And obviously Kelce just is brilliant himself. Great receiving talent, excellent body control, hands, route running ability, super physical when he's stemming up against people and kind of using that frame to wall them off. You could argue that without him, that offense really doesn't work. Like he is that special of a talent. So I think there's an easy argument for him, at least in my opinion, as being TE1 this year. I understand why people will take him before the third round because, again, he's kind of a unicorn, but just on principle, I've got him in the third. Zach Ertz, similar kind of story. I mean, he's going to end up in the Eagles Ring of Honor one day, might even end up in the Hall of Fame. I mean, just a reception monster. Even though he's a tight end, I think you could argue he's one of the most effective big slot receivers in the league, right up there with Michael Thomas and Juju Smith-Schuster. And his targets and his production kind of indicate that. Especially when they're just running RPO after RPO, like he is the primary target on those when he's in the big slot because he gets matched up with safeties, he gets matched up with linebackers man-to-man, and all he's got to do is run that slant, which he is so damn good at on an RPO. That ball's coming out quick, and it's almost indefensible. I can't even count how many of his catches last year were just on that quick slant where he's isolated in man coverage on an RPO, and it's easy money. And he's going to get the same thing this year. Like their system's kind of built around that. Again, I did an episode on that before they won the Super Bowl a couple seasons ago. You can go check that out. But Zach Ertz is just a tremendous talent. You can line him up anywhere on the field, and he's going to be productive. He has the record to prove it. He's in an offense that I think is going to be explosive. The one thing maybe you can say he's not going to get a whole lot of red zone work just because they have so many other red zone weapons there now with Alshon and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who they specifically drafted for that role. I think Miles Sanders is going to get the rock a lot inside the 5. So, maybe the red zone production won't be there, but just in terms of pure receptions and yardage, in a PPR format, he's going to be just unbelievably valuable and unbelievably consistent. So, Zach Ertz, again, you really can't go wrong with him in the third round. And George Kittle, I don't think you can go wrong with him either. Some people were saying that he was going to be a fluke and that people were going to overdraft him and there's no way he could do it again. Look, I'll point you to last year's tight end rankings. I had him graded, it was either 8th or 9th round as a pick, which was like 3 rounds above his ADP. Everybody thought I was crazy for taking George Kittle in the 9th round. I got him on every single one of my teams because of that, because I was aggressive with targeting George Kittle because I knew he was a beast, especially in that system, which literally prioritizes bootlegs and it prioritizes the tight end on those bootlegs and putting him in the slot and isolating him on deep overs and, giving him easy reception after easy reception on those shallow crosses. Like the whole system is built around that concept. And I tried to explain that to people. And if you listened and you got George Kittle last year, he probably won you your league because that was one of the most phenomenal tight end seasons that I've ever seen. And it was only his, second year in the league? But he's an athletic freak. He's in a system that is literally designed around him, which there's only a couple other names that I can say that about, and it's Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz. And he's projected to me to still do the same thing this year. Like, even though, Dante Pettis is going to be the X receiver and he's going to get a lot of targets, and even though, they have Deebo Samuel, who, if he can stay healthy, I think is going to be effective in the slot. Like, the offense is designed around bootlegs, and the offense is designed around getting the tight end the ball in the flat and the X receiver the ball deep. Like, he's still going to have that target share. I 100% believe that. This was not a fluky season. This was not just, they could only throw to Kittle and nobody else. Like, this is the offense. This is the best tight end that Kyle Shanahan has ever had. And Kyle Shanahan tight ends are always very productive. So, again, I have no worries about George Kittle repeating his monster year. I think he's going to do it again. I don't want to say he's going to set another record for tight end yardage, but at the very least, I think you can not pen him in for 1,000 yards. And just a whole lot of yards after the catch and a whole lot of touchdowns. I think he's going to be phenomenal. So it's hard for me to put him above Kelce and Ertz just because Kelce and Ertz have such fantastic track records. But would it surprise me if he finished his TE1? No, it would not surprise me at all. He's really, really that gifted. And then I'm kind of skipping over round 4 because I didn't really have any names that I was comfortable taking that high. But there is a group of 3 in round 5 that I think could all be very sneaky values. If maybe you think that some of those round 5 receiver group, like if you watch the receiver episode, there's a lot of round 5 receivers. If you think you kind of want to wait for one of them to fall into round 6 and you want to lock up tight end before that, all these 3 are the names you're going to be looking at. It's Evan Ingram, O.J. Howard, and Hunter Henry. Ingram specifically, I think, is almost like a Zach Ertz light. He's more athletic than Ertz, but he's not quite as polished, and I don't think he has the same kind of focus on him in that offense, meaning the offense isn't really as designed around him as, Philly's offense is designed around Ertz. But, they play a very similar role where, Ingram, he's moved around a lot. They put him in the slot. They'll flex him out wide. They'll put him in the backfield sometimes. And he's a truly phenomenal athlete. And I think if they made more of an effort to get him the ball, he could put up Zach Ertz kind of numbers. And he was still incredibly productive, even without being kind of the sole focus of the offense. But I'm very intrigued to see if the Giants this year, recognizing that their 2 best options arguably are Saquon Barkley and Evan Ingram, if they kind of take an Eagles approach and design their offense around the run game with Barkley and RPOs to Ingram and Shepard in the slot, and then I guess Tate whenever he gets back as well. But all their personnel kind of fits that style of offense where it's short passes, you take the occasional deep shot, but really it's short passes and RPOs and get the ball out quick and run the ball. Like, they're kind of built for that. So I'm very intrigued if they do it, because if they do, Ingram can be a truly monstrous producer here. I think he's going to produce no matter what, but if they take that next step in terms of system design, he could put up TE2, TE3 type numbers just like Zach Ertz, because he is talented enough to do that. So I'm not ready to rank him in that group because I'm not 100% sure if the system is going to be as friendly to him as some other systems for the tight ends above him. But man, if they just put in that little bit of extra effort to kind of manufacture touches like the top guys get, he will put up incredible numbers. I can promise you that. O.J. Howard, similar kind of thing. One of the most talented tight end prospects that I've ever graded. When he was coming out of Alabama a couple years ago, he is more naturally talented than Ertz. He's more naturally talented than Kelce. He's more naturally talented than Kittle. And all those guys are freaks of nature, and Howard is more talented. You could even argue he's more talented than Ingram, because even though Ingram's faster, like, he doesn't have OJ's size, he doesn't have OJ's physicality as a blocker. Like, OJ is the prototypical tight end, and the highest graded tight end that I've seen coming out of college since Gronk came out in, 2009, 2010. So like this guy is like one of a kind, and he stands out among a field of freaks. That being said, he's not in the same kind of offense that all of the guys above him are in that really prioritize the tight end. Like Bruce Arians historically doesn't prioritize that position. But at the same time, he's never had this kind of unicorn like O.J. Howard. He's never had a tight end that he could feel comfortable making a centerpiece in his offense. So it's a little bit of a projection because I'm kind of more gambling on the talent than the team, but I learned long ago that usually talent wins out, and O.J. Howard is arguably the most talented player on that entire team, and that includes Mike Evans, that includes any of their defensive players. Like, he is the most talented guy on that team. If they use him, I hope they do, he can put up huge numbers, but I think just because he's so talented and because he can take, a slant 80 yards on any given play, and because, you can throw him deep shots, which they like to do, like, just on talent alone, even if the system isn't designed for him, I think he has a very high floor, and I think he's worth a 5th-round pick. So I'm very intrigued to see how they use him. If they just, again, it's the same thing with Evan Ingram. If they put in just a little bit of effort to design plays just for him as the primary read, he can be one of the truly elite tight ends in this game. I just want to see how the system kind of works out in his favor. The Eagles' offense was not always designed around tight ends. The Chiefs' offense was not always designed around tight ends. But they got one of those ultra-talented tight ends, and they decided that they were going to do that. They were going to focus on them, and hopefully the Bucs do the same thing once they realize what they have. Hunter Henry, he's coming off an ACL, but it's an ACL that was almost 2 full years ago, at least 18, 19 months ago. So, he's 100%. He's fully healthy. I'm not worried about him, quote unquote, coming off of injury, because he's really not. He was even active for their playoff game last year. Like, that's how fast he came back. So I'm not really worried about any sort of getting back up to speed period. Like, he's ready to go. And if you remember him during his rookie year, like, he was an incredible red zone asset for them. Excellent route runner, excellent blocker. Like, he is the future for them at that position. And I think his target share this year is going to reflect that, because he's a very, very versatile and very tough to cover weapon. Not as athletically gifted as any of the guys above him on this list, like, not even close. But when you look at his hands and his body control, his route running acumen, his ability to kind of position himself and almost like out leverage people to death in the red zone, like, he's gonna get fed in the red zone. I think between him and Mike Williams, they're probably going to get most of the red zone targets, even over Keenan Allen, because I think Henry and Williams are both better red zone weapons. And if Melvin Gordon doesn't show up, who was huge in the red zone for them, if he doesn't show up and he holds out the whole year, because I guess they're not going to trade him, they're going to need both Henry and Williams to produce heavily in the red zone. So they're going to give him even more targets. Do I expect him to get as many catches as Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle, and maybe even Ingram or Howard? Probably not. But I do think that he has the most red zone potential out of everybody except for maybe Travis Kelce. At minimum, he has just as much red zone potential as Kelce, but you could argue that he's going to be even more of a focal point than even Travis would be. So I'm very excited about Hunter Henry. He's going to be an easy TE1 for me, probably like a TE5 or 6 throughout the whole year. Maybe the booms won't be as big as some of the guys in front of him, but I really don't think he's ever going to have a bad week, just because of his role as a safety blanket and as a red zone target. Like, he's going to get a lot of points. And then moving on to round 7, I only got one name in round 7. Again, skipping over round 6 because I didn't really find any values I like there. But in round 7, I'm going with David Njoku, ultra athletic tight end prospect. One of the more athletic tight ends to come out in the last few years, right up there with Ingram and Howard and Kittle. He runs like a deer, jumps 38 inches, I think it is, in like a 6'4", 250-pound frame. Like, physically speaking, like, this kid's a monster. And I think he has a quarterback that is super accurate and can get him the ball in the red zone and actually make use of him in the red zone. So again, just like Hunter Henry, I think his touchdown potential is very, very high. In terms of total receptions, I don't necessarily think he's in an offense that's like designed around him. I think it's more designed around like pounding the run with Nick Chubb, maybe focusing more on Jarvis over the middle than Njoku, and then of course hitting Odell on the outside and Higgins on the outside. And then I guess whenever Callaway gets back from his suspension and high ankle sprain, like, he's a little bit more of a deep threat too. So Njoku, like, between the 20s, I'm not sure how much work he's going to get, but once you get inside the 20, I really, really, really like him in the red zone. Because, as good as Odell is in the red zone, like, I think Njoku can be even better. So it's kind of a similar story to Hunter Henry, just maybe with not as high as a floor, because I think Hunter Henry is going to get even more looks, like reception-wise, than Njoku. But just in terms of pure touchdown potential every single week, I really, really like him as a 7th-round pick. And for like a low-end tight end 1, because I've got him as TE7, like, he's a very, very good value here. And then in round 8, I've got Trey Burton and Jared Cook. And here's where we kind of get into the part of the draft where it's like shaky round 1 shaky tight end 1s. Guys that should put up top 10 to 12 tight end numbers, but you're not 100% sure. Burton, I think when you look at that offense, that is an offense that I think can be designed around the tight end, similar to Zach Ertz, because it's that same kind of Andy Reid flavor of West Coast offense that also integrates a lot of air raid concepts and RPOs, and it's not your grandfather's West Coast offense. Like, they actually use the tight end a lot, but at the same time, I think they're a little bit more run heavy. And I feel like they're less focused on pushing the ball over the middle, and they're more focused on kind of taking shots outside on the boundaries to Allen Robinson, and then, Taylor Gabriel's still there. So, maybe the reception count isn't going to be as high as Zach Ertz, even though they're in similar systems. And, Travis Kelce's in a similar system as well. But I do think that they take a lot of shots to him downfield. If you look at that Mitch Trubisky breakdown, like the Seattle concept, which they run like every week, like Burton was the benefactor on most of those. Like, they'll design plays for him deep down the field off play action. And of course, he'll get kind of the typical tight end, like, I'm sitting down in between zones and, I'm your check down type receptions, those cheap, 1.5 points that you get 2 or 3 times a game. But I do really like that when they do use him, it's deep down the field. So when he catches a ball, it's going to be worth a lot of points for you. His yards per catch is probably going to be up there among the best, I think, this season. But his total yardage and his total production might not be there. And also in the red zone, like, I don't think he's going to get a whole lot of red zone work because Allen Robinson's going to catch a lot of fades for them because that's kind of what he does. David Montgomery's going to get a lot of touches inside the 5 and 10 yard line. Like, I don't know if the red zone work's going to be there like it is for Henry and Njoku and Kelce, but we're kind of running thin on tight ends here, and he's one of the best bets that you can get, at least at this point, for tight end 1 numbers. And then right after him, I've got Jared Cook, who, the Saints offense is probably the main reason why I have him this high, because, Sean Payton has a history of featuring tight ends when he gets his hands on a big athletic tight end. Looking back, the Jimmy Graham glory days when he was putting up wide receiver 1 numbers even every single week. So Jared Cook, I'm not saying he's going to replicate that, but I think being in a system that has a history of featuring the tight end is good for him. I don't necessarily think he's as athletic as like prime Jimmy, but he's still very athletic. And when you also factor in that the Saints don't have a whole lot of guys to throw to outside of Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, which was a problem that I highlighted schematically with them last season. Go look up that episode where I think it was the Cowboys like completely shut them down when they locked in on Kamara with a cornerback and doubled Thomas. Like they didn't have anybody else. So I think Jared Cook is going to be I don't want to say a benefactor of them not being deep, but he kind of will be because if teams kind of employ that same game plan of, okay, we're putting our dime corner on Alvin Kamara on 3rd down and we're doubling, Mike Thomas with a bracket inside and out, like Jared Cook's going to be the only guy left. So they got to throw to him. So I think he's going to get a lot of targets just for that reason alone when teams make an effort to take away Alvin and Mike. And I think he's going to get some pretty decent work in the red zone as well because we've seen them feature the tight end in that role where we're going to throw fades to you, we're going to throw play action slants to you, we're going to do everything we can to open things up inside the 5-yard line specifically for our tight end. Like, Sean Payton does that. He's one of the best play callers ever. So I think really I'm not necessarily drafting Cook, I'm drafting the situation. Because there are a lot of targets to be had here, and he's in an offense that's friendly to a tight end. So you could plug pretty much any athletic tight end in there, and I think it would probably be the same thing. Round 9, this is kind of where I typically have like my sleeper tight end that you really want to look out for. Like if you're in a dynasty league, like these are the names that I'm targeting the most, as well as, kind of some veteran staples that I think are worth looking out for. Jordan Thomas is my young tight end sleeper of the year. Last year it was Kittle and Njoku, and they both worked out, especially Kittle. This year it's Jordan Thomas. I think he is going to be featured way more in the red zone than people think he is. He's been the most impressive Texans tight end in camp by a long shot. Again, another very athletic, big body that is really tough for linebackers to keep up with one-on-one, and he's too big for safeties to handle one-on-one. And they're in an offense that features tight ends regularly. Like the Texans run 12 personnel more than, I think, all but 2 or 3 other teams in the league. So they love using their tight ends. Bill O'Brien has a history of using tight ends whenever he can get one. Because he was one of the architects of that Boston TE party with Gronk and Hernandez back in, 2011, that took them all the way to the Super Bowl. So, Bill O'Brien loves using tight ends, and they've invested so much in the position since Bill O'Brien's been there. He's been trying to find a tight end that he can feature. And I say this as a Texans fan because he's used so many picks and so many free agent assets. Like he's done everything he can to get a tight end that he really loves. He finally got one with CJ Fedorowicz, but his career ended because of concussions. And Jordan Thomas, I think, is going to be next in line to be Bill O'Brien's tight end. So that's a very valuable role for him. It doesn't hurt that he's also exceptionally talented. So when you factor in that he has a coach that really wants to use him, a quarterback that really likes to throw to him in the red zone, and just being naturally talented and in an offense that's going to be highly productive overall, like I really, really, really like Jordan Thomas as kind of my sleeper tight end of the year. He's going to be available way later than round 9. I can almost promise you that. I think most people are still trying to figure out if it's going to be Tommins or Akins or Kahale Waring. It's going to be Thomas. Like I can pretty much guarantee you it's going to be Thomas in this offense. Waring is nice. He's, again, highly athletic, very high upside prospect, but he is a rookie. And I think at best, Waring is going to be like the move tight end and the second wing tight end they bring in for 12 personnel. But when they go 11, and they're going to be 11 a lot, Jordan Thomas is going to be on the field. So I cannot stress this enough. He is in the perfect situation with the perfect quarterback in the perfect offense to be successful. And if you wait and you get him later in the double-digit rounds, like if you're waiting way late to get a tight end because you're loading up on everything else, I think you could do a lot worse than Jordan Thomas late in this draft. Vance McDonald is another one. If you miss out on maybe Jordan Thomas because people are kind of catching on to him, if you miss out on Burton and Cook and Njoku, and obviously you missed out on all the other guys too, and you're just looking to get anybody, somebody who you think can be a top 12 tight end, Vance McDonald I think is a pretty solid bet. At very minimum, because I think he's going to get a lot of work in Pittsburgh. Now that AB is gone, Juju's still going to be in that big slot role, but he can't do everything himself. He's going to get a lot of double teams just by the nature of the big slot position, because that's what happens. Linebackers wall off inside, corners are playing outside leverage, post safeties are sitting over the top. Like Juju's going to get a lot of attention. Not saying Juju can't be productive, because he was playing the exact same role last year, but on third downs, like, people are going to be paying more attention to Juju than anybody else. So I think Vance is going to get a lot of one-on-one looks. I think safeties are going to be rolling away from him when he's going up the seam. So I think you could take shots to him in that scenario, which we know they love to do. I think they're going to throw a lot of tight end screens because they kind of have to now. He's going to be, I think, the de facto number 2 passing option for this team. Deontay Johnson, I love Deontay Johnson. Their rookie wide receiver, again, another flyer name to keep out for, especially if you're in Dynasty. But I don't expect him to step into that number 2 target role immediately. I think it's going to be Vance McDonald. He's got a good rapport with Ben Roethlisberger. He's a talented tight end. He's reliable, and he knows the system. And I think he could very easily hit 60-plus catches this year, 800-plus yards and 6 to 7 touchdowns, which it sounds like it's higher than TE11 or TE12 numbers, which it probably would be. But at the same time, I don't think he's got the same ceiling as a lot of the guys above him that I think can hit 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns. So if you're looking for a very high floor player that at minimum I think can be like in the top 10 to 12 tight ends and be reliable every single week, Vance McDonald's your guy. Don't expect him to be like TE5 because I think there's a whole laundry list of names ahead of him that I would think are safer bets for that. But if you just need somebody you can start, he's a very, very, very reliable late round tight end. Jack Doyle's another one, just like Vance, where, maybe not as high of a ceiling as Burton or Cook or Njoku or anybody in the top 6, but I think his floor is very, very high because of the connection he has with Andrew Luck, their penchant for prioritizing tight ends, especially in the red zone. We already saw that when he was healthy and in there, even with Ebron on the team, he was out-snapping him by a mile because he's a much better blocker. So when they're in 11 personnel, which I think they're going to be in 11 a lot more this year, I think Doyle is going to be the tight end that's on the field for them, and he's going to be a huge red zone weapon for them because a lot of their receivers are kind of little outside of, Devin Funchess might be the only one that's over 6'2", maybe. But, I think Doyle is going to be fed in the red zone just as much as Ebron was last year just because he's a better tight end. And we know that they prioritize tight ends in the red zone there. So I think system fit wise, he's in line for a huge load of targets, especially valuable targets down inside the 20. I think if he's healthy, he's going to outsnap Ebron by a lot. And I think he's got such a good connection with Luck that if Luck is also healthy, he's going to be looking for Jack a lot over the middle. So again, very high floor player, maybe not as high of a ceiling just because I'm a little bit concerned about durability. And I think in between the 20s, Ty and Paris and, maybe even Deion Kane and Nyheim Hines will get a lot more targets than him. But, it's similar to kind of Hunter Henry and David Njoku. Once they're in that red zone, I think it's going to be Jack Doyle country. And then round 10, Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews surprised me a lot for Baltimore last year because I loved Hayden Hurst. I think he was a very talented tight end. Mark Andrews was a much better player than the tight end that they drafted 2 rounds ahead of him. Andrews was a 3rd-round pick, and he played like a 1st-round pick. He looked fantastic in that offense. And, the only reason why I maybe don't have him higher is because I have some questions about his quarterback situation. I've done multiple episodes about my reservations with Lamar Jackson as a passer, but at the same time, when you look at Andrew's catch radius, very, very good hands, the fact that he's an excellent target to use over the middle because he's a super tough receiver in traffic, and Lamar's more comfortable throwing over the middle, so they like to use him more on like pop passes and slants and seam routes and all that kind of stuff. Like, he kind of fits what Lamar needs the most right now, which is just a big, reliable, sturdy receiver that can make him right. Lamar's not going to make Andrews right. Like, he's not good enough to do that yet. But, Andrews can make Lamar correct. He can kind of make up for errant passes and spotty ball placement. He can be that safety blanket over the middle. He can be that reliable red zone threat where you throw it up and you just kind of let him do the rest of the work. Does Lamar limit Andrew's ceiling a little bit? Yeah, maybe, just by nature of what he is right now. But at the same time, I think when you factor in what the system is, which is a lot of ground and pound and, play action slants and play action pop passes and all that kind of stuff, or running TE screens off play action, like, he's going to get targets. So again, the ceiling isn't there, but I think the floor is. So you could argue him very easily as like a low-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2, who could push for like top 10 to 12 tight end numbers. I'm not entirely sure he's going to get there yet, but I think he has a very good chance to, which is why I have him ranked as TE 13 right now. And in the next couple weeks, that could probably change pretty significantly as well. So keep an eye on the Patreon for that. And then round 11 plus, this is a lot of the depth that I mentioned earlier where, if you're in a 2 tight end league or you're looking for a backup tight end with upside that you can kind of rotate in and out based on matchups and all that kind of stuff. Because really pretty much everybody after Njoku is not immune to being replaced because of matchups. And really these guys in round 11 plus are the ones that you would be considering doing that with. It's a very similar situation to quarterback yesterday, actually. Like how early you take your tight end 1 determines how late you take your tight end 2. If you take around 8, 9, or 10 tight end, you might want to draft your TE2 a little bit earlier to give yourself kind of a viable option to kind of stream in and out, so to speak. One of the names that I'm looking at here first are Chris Herndon. He's suspended for the first 4 weeks, so you're going to need a TE1 anyway. But when he gets back from that suspension, I think he could push for tight end 1 numbers. His connection with Darnold is fantastic, and obviously he's very, very gifted athletically. And I think that he is going to be a featured weapon for them over the middle. Le'Veon Bell's going to get his targets, obviously, as a check down and a screen target and everything like that. But on third downs, I think it's going to be the Chris Herndon show when he gets back. I think he's a very, very tough weapon to handle, because he's way too quick for linebackers, or at least most linebackers. And again, he's way too physical for most safeties. One of the only safeties I think that's in the league that could actually cover him is on his team in Jamal Adams, but it's a pretty short list after that in terms of safeties that I think could actually cover him one-on-one. So I'm very, very high on Herndon as a talent. Again, he's another one of those guys I picked up in my Dynasty League because I think when he gets back from that suspension and, he kind of gets slotted immediately into the starting lineup, he's going to be a featured weapon for them. So very, very high on him. Ebron I also have as like a round 11 plus target, as I don't want to say like a handcuff for Jack Doyle, but kind of, a handcuff for Jack Doyle. I think when Doyle's there, he's going to outsnap Ebron by a lot, but he's worth rostering just in case Doyle gets hurt again, because we saw what happened last year. Whoever is the tight end in that offense is going to be featured. And so I think he's worth a late round stash just for that reason. Jordan Reed, another one, worth a late round stash. He's always hurt. He's perpetually injured. But when he's healthy, he is arguably a startable tight end. I think if, you could kind of get a little bit coy here with your draft strategy. If you're waiting until way late in the draft for tight end, maybe you want to double up on 2 of these round 11 plus tight ends. Like you want to get Jordan Reed and Chris Herndon because, maybe Reed won't last past week 4 or 5, but by then Herndon will be back. So like you can kind of get cheeky with it a little bit in that way and almost like stream your way to tight end 1 numbers. Like it's possible to do that. And Reed, I think, is one of those tight end 2s that you want on your team for like flex options, or, if you're in a 2 tight end league, obviously he's a priority. I don't necessarily trust him as a tight end 1 in like a single tight end 12 to 14 team league, but he is still extremely talented, and I think he is still going to be featured in the red zone for them because he's their best red zone weapon by a pretty significant margin. So like there is upside there. The downside is him always being hurt, but the upside is still just as high as it ever was. Kyle Rudolph is like your classic steady Eddie TE2. Like I'm getting 600 yards, I'm getting 6 touchdowns. If you need like an emergency start for whatever reason, you can throw him in there and he'll probably get you, 8, 9 points, but it's not nothing. So it's worth something. Don't expect a whole lot from him, like unless he's going against a defense that like can't cover tight ends at all, and he's going to be a big featured part of the game plan because of that, which only happens maybe once or twice a year. Like he's really more of like a DraftKings kind of play for me than anything else. But again, out of desperation, he's not the worst start in the world. Dallas Goedert is like a super, super, super high end backup, where, even though he's not the TE1 on his own team, he's so damn good that I still think he's going to get a lot of work. I think he will also not be as featured in the red zone just like Zach Ertz, but if Zach gets hurt, again, knock on wood, like Dallas Goedert is one of the most valuable tight end, quote unquote, handcuffs that you can possibly have. So if your league has very, very deep benches and you can afford to stash a backup tight end who also works as kind of an emergency start because you think he's going to catch at least 3 passes or 4 passes in a game, like most likely 3 if we're being realistic. But if you're satisfied with somebody getting you 6 or 7 points in an emergency start role, but potentially getting you like 20 points if the starter gets hurt, like Goddard is your guy. Like, again, he's really only going to be drafted in leagues where you can kind of afford to stash him on a deep bench, but in those specific scenarios, I think he is well worth a late round pick because his upside, if he becomes a starter, is just enormous. Really, the only downside to him is that he's already on a team with an elite tight end, and there's only so many targets to go around. But man, he is a really, really gifted tight end, and I wish he was just anywhere else. TJ Hawkinson, I think, he's a rookie, so you kind of have to manage expectations. Historically, rookie tight ends aren't super productive, but if I was going to bet on any rookie to be productive at that position, it'd probably be TJ Hawkinson. He's one of the best tight end prospects that I've scouted in the last, 8-9 years, really second only to like OJ Howard. Just a really complete player, excellent blocker, very, very polished receiver, catches everything thrown his way, physical in his routes. Not as talented as OJ, but I think he's further along in terms of development, in terms of technique, especially as a blocker. I think he's a better blocker than OJ was coming out of Alabama. So I think he's going to be on the field a lot more, especially on early downs, especially when they're working play action. Like, he's going to be a focal point of the offense in that aspect. And I think he's also going to be a focal point in the red zone too. So, his total ceiling is not nearly as high as a lot of the veterans here, just because historically rookie tight ends don't produce a whole lot. But giving perspective against other rookie tight ends, like if there was any rookie that would come out and be like a startable tight end for you from week to week, it's probably him. So again, you're really drafting him as like a flyer, a TE2, a guy that you're weighing against Burton and Cook and Thomas from week to week. You're not really taking him to compete against the Kelseys and the Ertzes and the Kittles for roster spots. You're taking him against the other late round guys. And then, after him, it's a whole lot of veterans, a couple high upside young players like Noah Fant, who I think can eventually be as productive as George Kittle. Probably not as a rookie, but in Dynasty, I'm targeting him in virtually every Dynasty league I'm in. Ben Watson's a grizzled old vet who's been around forever. In an offense that's very friendly to tight ends. Greg Olsen, same kind of thing, grizzled old vet, tight end friendly offense. His floor and the ceiling are pretty much the same thing these days. You could say the same thing about Delaney Walker and Jimmy Graham and all these older tight ends. Their floor and the ceiling are exactly the same. 40 to 50 catches, 600 yards, 5-ish touchdowns, maybe 6. But you know what you're getting with them, and I think that's the value, is that you do know what you're getting, especially in a 2 tight end league, or maybe a very, very deep league. Like I played in one where like I had to start 11 guys every single week and 11 on defense, and we had 45-man rosters, and it was super deep. Like the benches were crazy, but those veteran tight ends that I could plug in any given week and know that I'm going to get 7, 8, 9 points kind of no matter what. And sometimes they'll catch a touchdown and pop off for double digits. Like, that's very valuable for a 2 tight end league. So you're really only going to be drafting them in certain formats and certain scoring systems and that kind of stuff. But they're still worth mentioning, and they're still worth ranking just for that alone. And with that, I think that's going to wrap it up for this year. I hope you guys enjoyed 4 semi-straight days of fantasy content. I hope you guys really enjoyed all these rankings and kind of how I do things. It's a little bit different than most people in terms of philosophically how I draft, but hopefully these help you out as much as these help me out every single year. And again, one more reminder, if you guys want updates for all these rankings every single week, both for PPR and for standard and the combined position big board, head on over to my Patreon. It's going to be available for all my patrons exclusively. It doesn't matter how much you give. It can be only $1 a month, and you'll get access to all of that. You can also leave your email in the comments or direct message me on Patreon, and I will add you to a rolling updated Google spreadsheet that you can use for your drafts. That anytime I update it, it will automatically be updated for you. So just keep the link. You can go back to it whenever your drafts are, and it will be fresh and new just for you. And again, that's exclusively for all my patrons. So click that link down in the description below to go to my Patreon. Again, it doesn't matter how much you give. And if you decide you don't want to and you just want to go off of these main base kind of first draft rankings, that's fine too. I appreciate everybody who watches this, and I appreciate all my sponsors for making this week possible. I'm ready for this season to start. I have not been this excited for a season in a very long time. So you guys really, really make it fun for me, and I can't wait to see what happens this year. So again, thank you all for watching this week. I'll be back next week with more Film Room episodes. And until then, later.